Now, on some education issues, you also mentioned early college high school. What exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, so that's the Gatton Academy down in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I actually went through the summer program that was the offshoot, the Vampy camp, in the 80s. And basically, what they did was that's a 3-week camp where you end up spending on campus in a dorm, but taking in some cases college level courses. The Gatton Academy was the extension of that, which that's a 2-year program, and essentially you are living on campus like the camp I attended, but it's for 2 years. And the courses that they take at the Gatton Academy are college level courses. So what's neat about that is that the first time I came across this, I was invited to speak at a gifted education seminar about 10 years ago. It was down at Shakertown, I think. And they had 5 kids. This was a relatively new program. And so I got a chance to ask some questions because I was kind of curious. One of the fascinating things about these kids is they all had double and triple majors, which is of supreme importance because it turns out that if you're looking for a job that makes the most money, it lies at the intersection of 2 disciplines, usually. And sometimes you can throw a third one in there and you might be the only person in the world that can. So like archaeology, computer science, and economics, for example, have some very rare sort of intersections that you can accomplish a lot with if you know the right people. In particular, one of the kids at that was math, computer science, and psychology. And I was like, you need to get to Wall Street right now because you could design high-speed trading algorithms. Because Wall Street's realized that psychology is a big component of economics, something that they didn't necessarily realize about 10 years ago. So, and I talked to these kids, and my question to them was, the main one was like, do you feel like you had a reduced social experience than your classmates because these people, like, they went from their high schools wherever they were, and they went to live down in Bowling Green on campus at WKU. And I said, do you feel like you missed out? And they're like, we don't understand the question. And I talked to them afterwards about it, and they said, no, we don't. It said, in fact, like, we feel like we had a better experience based on it, because like a bunch of them attended UK together. Of the 5 there, I think 3 were getting ready to start classes in the fall, and they were already talking about, but they'd already been in college for 2 years. So if anything, they were actually farther advanced on the social scale than other people were. So I really like this, the idea, because that allows, like, if you've got kids that are capable of handling that kind of a workload, you can throw them into that kind of a system and produce people who have very rarefied, very high-tech skills.
Now, along the same sort of lines, the Chamber has pushed for charter schools, which would obviously help teachers be more innovative. It would help some low-income areas. It really just depends on what legislation is pushed.
Right.
What is your feeling on charter schools?
Yeah, and so you actually sort of hit the nail on the head there. It depends on what legislation is pushed, and it kind of does. Like, for somebody who's not of politics, the policy questions aggravate me the most. Not your question, but the reason why is because, like, how do you feel about charter schools? And I'm like, well, which implementation are we talking about? I think what California did doesn't seem to work very well. So it's really, for me, it's going to come down to what is the implementation. So in particular, we started digging into this, and it looks like the research indicates that it does help lower income places a lot. So for example, West Louisville is clamoring for these things. I would take an implementation that has been tried possibly in like DC, New York, St. Louis, that already exists and works, and then copy it or bring the people who are in charge of that out to Louisville as an expansion, for example, and then see how it goes. Rather than instituting a blanket edict going, okay, it's game on for whatever, it's like, let's try a small scale first. Let's have a couple of these things. You guys take a shot at it, and then we'll see how it goes. And if it works, then we'll look at expanding it. Let's be very methodical and conservative about this.
Which is what was pushed for in 2015. The bill actually would set up pilot projects for public charter schools in Jefferson County and Fayette.
Yeah.
So that's
I would be in favor of that.
Okay.
And that's what I mean. It's like, so that's why it depends. Like, are we going to copy California? Nah, that's not a good idea. But that seems okay to me. It's like, or along the same lines, not to change the subject, just to make sure I'm not doing that. The fact that Warren County and passed right to work, and I think Fayette County is looking at it, or they might have passed it. I go ahead. I personally don't think right to work is an effective method of creating jobs, but I don't mind if a couple of cities want to take a shot at it. Go ahead. Let's see what happens. Because if it works, you've just proven me wrong, and now I know that I need to change my stance on it. It's all about, does this work or not? You want to try it in your own area? Have at it. Go for it.
We already stole one of my questions for later, but we'll come back to right to work. But on another education issue, Common Core.
Yes.
In this race, Matt Bevin has said that he is not in favor of the standards. He said he doesn't think they're working the way they were supposed to, and he would like to get rid of them. Jack Conway says that he thinks we should stay the course, but he's open to some changes. Have you looked into that issue at all? Would you repeal Common Core at this point?
I would not. I have friends who are teachers who also don't like it, but I wouldn't say it's like the majority. I know that somebody did a study where it said most teachers are in favor of it at this point. I would trust the teachers. I mean, if what they want to do, what they think they can implement, that would be the way to go. But I have a friend, I mean, again, it was like we had a rally a week ago, and one of my friends who's a teacher, he's like, he hates Common Core. But what he really hates about it, I don't think necessarily is the implementation. It sounds like it's more like the reporting requirements. It's the number of things that he has to do in order to be able to teach it. It sounds like it's the equivalent of like, that office like kitchen that everybody's got. And if you're really unlucky, you've got one of those people that writes a sign for everything. Like your mom doesn't work here, clean up, and then, put the towels back here, whatever. And so then you go into the kitchen and there's like 20 signs all over the place. And I get the impression that that is what teaching Common Core is like for them. So it isn't necessarily the way that it is, the concept, it's the implementation again, it's the problem. My solution there has been, starting with, I've never understood why we are so reluctant to throw regulation on business. Well, actually, I know why that is. But we don't seem to have any trouble throwing them on teachers. And shouldn't that also stop teachers from being able to function as teachers in the same way that it stops business from being able to do a good job as well? So, my thing is to go through and talk to them about, starting with, do you have a reporting requirement you don't like, or that you're pretty sure nobody's looking at? Can we get rid of that? Is there a better way to, fund schools other than who showed up today? Because you have so many snow days because if that's the way we fund schools, they can't stay open if more than 15% of the student body is not going to show up. I find that in particular interesting, not to get off on too much of a tangent, because that's a really complicated, wieldy system to fund schools that clearly replaced something else that wasn't working before. I really kind of curious to find out what that was. Mostly because is the thing it replaced before, was that long enough ago to where we now have a technological solution for it? Was the problem people were lying about attendance? Well, we can check that now. With ways other than, you pen and paper and having to have people show up. So I'm looking for solutions like that, basically.
So more at the local level.
Right, exactly. Well, and so in very specific ones too, it's like, you could be for or against Common Core and that excites people politically. But what I like is when I talk to teachers and I say, give me things that don't work for you. And one of them told me, she said, well, so my pay is based on whether or not my students do well. She said, first of all, can't we at least put some of the blame on textbook companies? I'm like, yeah, this seems reasonable. Implementation to be decided upon later, we'll find out, but I thought that was interesting. But the second thing that she said was, the other problem is they have 3 major tests that they get evaluated on, and the third one matters the most. The problem is the third one, they don't get the results back until after school is out and these kids are gone. So this doesn't help them become better teachers at all, and it's weighted higher. And I said, what would you recommend? And she said, could you make the second test count more? So I'm pretty sure if you throw that to the legislature, they'll be like, yeah, okay. And there's 1,000 more things like this. And so I'm trying to collect a list of these things to basically just sort of like, let's not assume as people who run government that we know how to run education just because we went to school.